go to the cloud and I have no idea how to find it. So anyways, back to my point on this, I firmly believe that 5 years from now, basically we become the people we associate with in the books that we read. And I'm a firm believer that we literally live a fraction of our potential. There's nobody that can't agree with that. We literally live a fraction of our potential. We have 1,440 minutes every single day. And once they're gone, we never, ever get them back. So ultimately, every single hour, I talked extensively about breaking it down to an hourly basis, have all 24 hours accounted for. And I've done this for decades. And so I will put in audio and then Spanish and then reading. And then a lot of times I'll go back and do more audio, then more Spanish, and then more reading. But there's not a day that goes by where I'm not hearing something that is like, I can't imagine not knowing this. I mean, it could be simple stuff. I mean, one of the programs I've been listening to is called something like the Ultimate Library on Self-Discipline. It's on Audible, and it's one of these deals where if you buy it individually, it costs like $50 or $70. But if you have the subscription for $14.95 a month, you get 1 credit a month, and that works for $70 programs or $5 programs. But here's an example. So they're doing a section talking about wellness, which is very relevant. And they talked about when people go to bed, there is some staggering number of like 50 million people in the United States have sleep issues. Okay, that's just a big number. And they gave simple tips and thoughts and ideas. For example, if a person were to take a hot bath before they went to bed, like 15 to 30 minutes before they went to bed, if you take a hot bath and you understand what happens is your body has a mechanism that essentially, if you get too hot, because your body core temperature has to stay at 98.6. And if you get 102-degree water or a hot tub or a hot bath or something like that, essentially your body kicks that in. It has been scientifically proven that people fall almost immediately to sleep. So instead of laying there for hours and hours and hours, because in the end, what we all want is the same thing. We all want energy. Energy is really the goal. And if people aren't getting the proper rest, because, it's like a 3-legged stool, you got to get proper rest, proper diet, proper exercise. And, so I'm not even getting into that. The point is the fact that I've never, out of all the books that I've read on personal development tying into fitness and wellness, I've never heard of it put that way, of actually a suggestion of taking like a hot bath or hitting a hot tub if you have a hot tub or access to one, and then actually getting yourself in a hot environment that forces your body internally thermostatically to cool down, which that's what your body needs to sleep. And everybody's heard about the REM cycles, but then there's like this delta wave cycle. That's where your deep sleep takes place. And that actually comes earlier. That's not later. That's why people can go back to bed in the morning and they still don't feel rested. They still don't feel energized. They still feel tired. So my point is this. My point is that it's just a never-ending process, constant and never-ending improvement of continually learning things. And I thought that was a really powerful example. And the crazy part is I can't remember the last day where I learned one thing. I can't. It's like every single day I have different bullet points, thoughts or ideas. It could do with spirituality, mental, physical. Like I mentioned recently, the book that I've been reading is the Tibetan book. I'll grab it here and let you see it, but the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. Wayne Dyer said this is like the best book he ever read in his life. Wayne Dyer is a person that you got to study. He's a guy who's got audio programs and books, and the guy's one of the best speakers you'll ever hear. And that guy was also notorious for running 7 miles a day for like 30 years. And he never ever even got the sniffles, because you think about it, when you're running, you're releasing endorphins, you got your white blood cells, you got all the things that come along with it. But this book right here, this book is deep. I mean, this book really changes your perspective. I mean, this really gets into the ultimate. The reality is when people accept their own mortality, and until any one of us accepts our own mortality, we don't truly live. And there was a movie Braveheart years ago, decades ago, William Wallace, it's Mel Gibson playing it. I think it was him. Anyways, was it him? I don't know. Anyways, he says that when she says, "Aren't you afraid of dying?" He says, "Every man will die, but not every man really lives." It's once you accept your own mortality, then essentially that's when you begin to live. And that's really what we all want, quality of life, and we want to be able to live along the way. That's the idea. So the crazy part is this book has stretched my mind and got me thinking in ways that I've never even thought possible. I mean, they start getting into reincarnation. And not that I'm advocating reincarnation, but the point is that even if you get into people like Henry Ford, once he understood the concept of the fact that when we live and then we die. And that's the problem people have. We live and then we die. What's the point? Okay. So what's the point of eating healthy? What's the point of taking care of ourselves if you just live and then you die? It's not about just having more years. It's not just about having more life to your years either. Years to your life and life to your years. This book looks at the possibilities from a karma perspective that ultimately it's this lifetime that leads to other lifetimes. And I really recommend, this is one I would go as bold as recommending everybody read. It gets you thinking totally different. Very, 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 very powerful. It's the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. So somebody write that in the chat for me. The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, and the author is some Chu. Anyways, yeah, I know, but yeah, it's there's only one version of it, man. But this book is blowing me away. Absolutely. Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now is probably one of the best books I've ever read in my lifetime. So this is what I want. This is what I really, really want this call to be about. I published a book probably 14, 15, 16 years ago called The 365-Day Challenge. And the reason I wrote the book was because of the fact that I had learned these habits, a lot of it coming from studying personal development, to where I would take any goal, whether it was learning a foreign language, whether it was making multiple six-figure incomes, whether it was running marathons, it doesn't matter what it was. And I would just break it down to, what do I do today? I would forget about yesterday, because yesterday's gone and tomorrow's promised to nobody. So the key to the book, and the best feedback I ever got from the book, was ultimately it's breaking it down to where any person can get that concept or idea, and they're going to look at that and say, oh my God, I can do that. You have to understand the power of that. Clarity is power. When you look at something and you break it down from a big goal, which every big goal, anything worthwhile in life, comes down to basically a whole bunch of little baby steps. But the reality is that it only takes a couple years for a person to transform their life in ways that most people will never do in an entire lifetime. And the main component that I really advocate in that book is the reason I started off with the question of how long has it been since a person read. It's all of a sudden we can read, we can get into a really good book, and all of a sudden 3 months go by and we think, I can't remember the last time I read a book. So when I was reading The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson, he really promotes reading 10 pages a day. I'm a big believer in that, because 10 pages doesn't take but 10 minutes. Realistically, 10 pages a day. It's about consistency. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people who are like, oh yeah, a friend of mine's learning French. I want to get Duolingo and I want to start studying this. And I tell them point blank, listen, there's only one thing you need to learn a foreign language. You need consistency. That's it. That's all you need. It doesn't require an IQ. It doesn't require some really crazy level of intelligence. You need consistency. If you are consistent, you can't not learn the language. You understand? But that applies to trading. If a person is studying trading, and if we're not getting the results we want to get, we have to ask ourselves, how much time am I putting into learning this craft? Okay, and it applies to everything. It doesn't care if it's spiritually, mentally, physically, socially. So this is just a very small call. We only have like 9 people on here, and it's probably including me, is starting today, not tomorrow, because tomorrow does not exist. That's something you should write down every day. Tomorrow does not exist. You should write that down every single day. You have 1,440 minutes, and once they're gone, you never, ever get them back. They're gone forever. This applies to everybody. I don't care if it's Greg Jones, who's Greg's, I think, turned 82 this year. So, I mean, he looks phenomenal for being 82. But either way, he's not a youngster like the rest of us. Anyways, but you get the idea. Ultimately, what I'm getting at here, and that was just for you, Greg, is just creating a streak. That's the idea. You create a streak. But here's the thing. Somewhere along the way, I don't remember where I heard it, but they talked about Bill Gates reading a book a week. He does 50 books a year. And I'm looking back and I've been keeping track and writing down books that I've read, and I have boxes and boxes and boxes. And I think I'm somewhere around 1,000 books that I've read in the last 30 years, not in the last, 5 years, but in the last 30 years. And the reality is that it's a never ending learning process. And some people say, yeah, but knowledge without action is useless, which is true, but you still have to get the knowledge. That's my point. You still have to get the knowledge. So then I thought to myself, here's what I want you to get out of this. Okay. Thought to myself, wait a second, what's it take for me to read a book a week? And does anybody have any idea? Somebody want to throw something in the chat? How do you read a book a week? What's the simplest way? Somebody put something in here just for fun. Give me a tip on what's the easiest way. What is the most predictable way to read, the most simplified way to read a book a week? And imagine if you were paid $10,000. What if somebody offered you $10,000, but you had to read a book in a week? Okay, so chapter a day, that's a good idea, but that wouldn't work because a lot of books have 20 chapters. Well, actually, that would work. So yeah, anyways, that'd be a good way of doing it. And I mean, yeah, I've read some books that have just a ton of chapters. I want to talk super simple. Okay. And that's it. Count the pages, divide by 7. It's exactly what I do. So if this book is 410 pages, I know basically it's about 60 pages a day. That's my target. And now the reality is, if I have a day like Monday, I went to a funeral. So, but did I still end up reading? Absolutely. Did I read 60 pages? No, it was a lot of family time going on, but I still read in the car. I'm still reading the pages. And the crazy thing is, people will say, yeah, but you know what? I got this going on. I got that going on. I mean, weddings to funerals to just life, stuff happens. But again, I promise you, if any single person who's on this call was paid $100,000 in cash, okay, and you had to read 60 pages a day, there's no reason you come up to miss it, okay? And you just break it down. Now, the reality is, if Monday I didn't read the 60 pages, I redo the count on Tuesday. But if I'm really getting in the zone and I'm really getting into the book, and I end up reading, say, 100 pages in a day, I still recalculate, divide by 6. The next day I recalculate, divide by 5. The next day I recalculate, divide by 4. That's all there is to it. But I don't believe there's a person whose life wouldn't change if they didn't start that habit starting today. So what you do is you put in your calendar, you put read, or if you speak Spanish, you put leer, which means to read, and you put dia 1 or dia uno. But just in English, just day 1, read day 1. And then once you did your reading, even if you didn't do your 60 pages, okay, the point is that you start. That's the hardest part of anything for everybody. And I always remind myself, my goal isn't to read 60 pages. My goal is to read 1 page 60 times, not the same one page 60 times, but that's how my brain works. My brain just says, okay, my goal is to read 1 page. And I got these little windows of opportunity throughout my day. And as soon as I'm subliminally telling myself my goal is to read 1 page, I pick up the book, I start reading. Sometimes I get half a page and I get distracted. But the point is, I take an orange marker and I mark on the page where I left off, and I have the bookmark. And the cool part is, this bookmark is a fun one. I bought this in Paris 20 years ago. So, I mean, the cool thing is, I've got these little artifacts from travels and whatnot, and that's what I recommend, collecting things like that have meaning. But that's really the only thing. There's always one thing. There's always one thing. I would love to see somebody start that habit. I had a person who had found my book, I don't know, 10 years ago. He was a pilot for Southwest Airlines. Long story short, he ended up dropping like 100 pounds. And in chapter 4, I give a bunch of tips. I'm only giving one. I think the only one, if you could only do one thing, okay, it would be reading. Forget everything else, okay? You could add more things, but you could also get overwhelmed. I think goals should be written daily. There's whole studies done on that. I think gratitude needs to be done every single day. But guess what? How many people have gone the last 7 days without getting dressed? Okay? I mean, raise your hands on that one. That's just what you do. You wake up, you get dressed. Unless you're running around naked, you just do it. You just get dressed. I was going to give the example of brushing teeth or bathing, but I'm not 100% sure everybody does that every day. I mean, most people do, right? but I mean, those are obvious ones. So then you have to create one thing, okay? Because it's not because I'm putting the challenge out there, it's because we all know deep down inside, you look back and realize 1,440 minutes, and you look back and go, man, where'd that day go? And it's like, and then you realize where we feel frustrated in life is because we know we're capable of more. That's what frustration comes from. We know we're not living our best life. We know we're not living up to, we're not even scratching the surface. But it's important to do this because the reality is we've got a whole life ahead of us. We have a tremendous life. And the sooner, this is my motive, the sooner that I can accomplish success in any level, in any category, it helps you succeed in other categories. But then you have the youth to enjoy life. It is more fun exploring Venice or exploring Paris or exploring Zurich or exploring Africa when you have your youth and your energy to do it versus reaching the point of 75 years old. If a person makes it that long, I have a goal of living to 100. There's a book written about it, by the way, about how to live to 100 years old. And this was another tip I got today. This guy says it's the number one question he gets from all the speaking that he does, all the events, radio, TV, events, is people always ask, what's the number one? If you could tell me one thing, what's the one thing that I could do to be able to maximize my life? Again, it's not just about having years in your life, it's about having life in your years. He said, stop killing yourself. Think about that. That's what he said. Stop killing yourself. That's the advice he gives everybody because people have a lifestyle where they're not getting the proper rest. They're eating just pure, terrible food because, again, nothing has a greater impact on the way your body looks, feels, and functions than what you feed it. But it could be so many categories. And the key to life is moderation. I mean, since this isn't compliant, but I mean, there's a glass of wine. But anyways, it's just about having some type of balance in life. That's the key. But I love what he said. Stop killing yourself. And it makes a person more aware and to where they can literally fuel themselves properly and do the things. But I think fundamentally the most important thing that anybody watches this, if I can figure out how to put this recording on YouTube, because I'm obviously getting stuck on that one, Alyssa will help me with that. But the point is that anybody watches this thing recorded, I like the guy in Texas, okay? Because this guy, I gave him one idea, was to do push-ups. Take a deck of cards, which, by the way, I did that today. Take a deck of cards. I've done it since like July 6th of 2007. Yeah, 2007, July 6th of 2007. Anyways, but the point is you take a deck of cards and you do the push-ups every single day. You just do them. You go through the whole deck. And it doesn't, that was just, for me, it was core because you don't need a gym. There's no excuse. But the reality is reading is fundamentally there. And this gentleman would send me an email saying, I'm up to day 3,417. I'm up to whatever. And eventually he got my number. So he would even text me updates because when I was doing marathons on a daily basis, he would even touch base and check in with how things were going on that. But it's really, really cool because of the fact that you become what everybody in life wants. You become unstoppable. You become completely unstoppable. That's why it's important to pick what I call core things, like getting dressed every day. That's a core thing that you do. So realistically, if I know I've got a lot of stuff on the calendar for the day, then it might be in my best interest to set my alarm 10 minutes early, 15 minutes earlier, and immediately first thing that I do, pick up the book and start reading. I'm not gonna try reading 60 pages in the morning. I'm just gonna start. Then I know that I can check that off, but then throughout the day, I've created that momentum, and then I'm just gonna keep chipping away at it. But the stuff that you will learn is like opening up Christmas presents, except it's knowledge and wisdom and thoughts and ideas. These seeds plant thoughts and ideas that cultivate who we are. So that's my one takeaway from today. And I'm going to end on this thought because we're already basically past 20 minutes is usually my cutoff. But essentially, I would love to get feedback from at least one person of day one, day two, and then all of a sudden 2 years later. Think about this. If you're at day 743, and then tomorrow you missed it, or let's say because tomorrow doesn't exist, let's say today you missed it, and the next day you got back to day one, you will not miss that day. That's what I've learned. You will not. You make it impossible because motivation only gets you so far. This has been proven over and over again. It all comes down to self-discipline. It's self-discipline. You create self-discipline. Self-discipline is defined as doing something when you don't feel like it. So that's my challenge for you. Start the reading habit, even though, now keep in mind, If you've read a book since high school, you're already in the top. I mean, I think 58% of people statistically don't touch a book. I don't know who's going around knocking on people's doors asking, did you read a book or didn't you read a book? But that's a stat that I heard according to some studies. 58% of people outside of high school never pick up a book. And out of that, the other half of the ones that do the reading, it's fiction. So only a smaller percentage. And then out of that, only like maybe people read 1 or 2 books a year. So the statistics are staggering. But if you actually look around at any people that you've ever studied that are 7, 8-figure income earners, I've never met a 7-figure income earner, 8-figure income earner, or 9-figure income earner who doesn't have the daily habit of reading. So again, you have to be it before you become it. Remember that. You have to be it before you become it. So if your goal is to be a millionaire, you have to be the millionaire before you become the millionaire. If your goal is to be a billionaire, you have to be a billionaire before you become the billionaire. We can't react to life and say, oh, okay, well, I can't do because of this, that, or whatever else. We all have the same 24 hours every single day. But the reading part to me is pivotal. It applies. There's nobody on this call it doesn't apply to. And if anybody needs any tips on what to read, the book that I have, the 365-day challenge, okay, if you could look it up on Amazon or Kindle, it's out there. It has a reading list in the back of the book, or just get a hold of me directly. I will gladly throw out thoughts and ideas because I have so many resources to work with, but never miss a day. See what, don't create a bunch of things. Make reading the one thing, okay? Make reading the one thing that you literally start a streak starting today. If one person did that, you have no idea the ripple effect that would have over the long term. So any thoughts or questions before I get off this overly extended call already? Thoughts, ideas? I respect you all for being here. Nobody has any thoughts or ideas. I'm going to close this out. And at some point, I'm going to figure out how to put this recording and find it. And then I'll put it out there. But appreciate everybody's time. And just remember, life is absolutely always what you make it.